is why I love having people in my life with different beliefs. We might disagree back and forth. I think that's okay. But when we have people who can at least...
I could recognize that God was speaking to me. It doesn't matter whatever they do. I know God's purpose is going to be what truly gets fulfilled. Honest with her. I was just straight up. I was like, girl, God does not have a wife. And then
girl, let me set the record straight. More than just your emotions, your temporary feelings, right? Because emotions are temporary, but our decisions we live with.
But the one who stands firm to the end will be saved.
Hey guys, my name is Kumi, and if you're new here, I'm an entrepreneur, independent artist, and most importantly, Christ follower, and this is the Faithful Breed podcast. This podcast and channel exists to encourage you to serve God faithfully, no matter the circumstance, no matter the season. And today I'll be having a conversation with a good friend of mine with all things concerning faith, life, and culture. She's someone who loves to share the gospel. If I could say that in one consistent phrase and describe her in a phrase, it's sharing the gospel. The only thing she loves more than that, obviously, is her relationship with Jesus. And if those are the two priorities, no one's going to bat an eye. But that being said, on top of that, she's pursuing a career in healthcare, which we're going to touch on that a little bit more later. And then lastly, if I were to describe her relationship with God, it's authentic. And everyone who, has an encounter with her, not only will you hear the gospel from her, but you'll also experience that authenticity in her relationship with Jesus. And so that being said, Stephanie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. And today I'm feeling great on this Good Friday. Yeah. Thank the Lord. And I mean, you don't have school today.
No, not today. Normally
Awesome.
I do. Normally on Fridays I go to my clinical rotation, but because of Good Friday, we were off, so I'm not that happy.
Good. That's so good.
Yes.
Man, remembering the days of school, as I tell most people, I would never, I don't regret my college experience, but I would never go through it again. So, I enjoyed graduation. I enjoyed getting my degree. I enjoyed, all the relationship that I had built. And I was kind of sad that the relationships that, I was used to seeing it on a day-to-day basis was going to change for me. But that being said, I did my time.
Yeah, you're free now.
I'm free. And so that being said, I want to hop straight into this conversation because we have kind of a lot to unpack here. And I want to get into, or at least start off with giving the viewership and the audience a bit about who you are, your testimony, because I have heard it before and there's a lot of powerful pieces in that. But just give them all around, like, who is Stephanie? And then, what have you had to overcome to get to know Jesus, but then also your walk with Jesus, how that's looked since then. And so we'll build from there.
Sure. So I first came to Jesus around 2018. And, so I've been walking with Jesus since that time. And I just want to, before I get more into that, I want to share just a little personal things about myself, like who I am. So obviously my name is Stephanie. I'm 25 years old. I'll be turning 26 years this year. And I was born in Mexico. I came over here when I was about probably 5 years old. And yeah, pretty much grew up here. And I know God, the way he orchestrates everything. Once I came over here to the United States and I grew up, I knew it was part of God's plan because, like I said, that's later on how I came to know Jesus. So first, I grew up in a Catholic home, but I didn't really know about Jesus. Well, I knew about him, but I didn't have that personal relationship with him. I would just go to church just because it was more like a tradition to me. My family goes to church. I go to church too, but I didn't actually have that, like I said, that relationship with God. And so I would just go to church, and there was a point, I did believe in God. I knew there was a God, but there was a point where I just decided to just stop believing in God just because I guess a post that I saw on Facebook, so it was more like an influence. So I was like, okay, maybe God's not real. And it wasn't until I started college. I graduated high school in 2017, and then I met a friend. I knew her since I saw her, we had school in middle school, high school, but we never talked. And I think even elementary school. But in college, we both had the same classes. We had 3 classes, I believe, and they were all the same. So we pretty much became good friends. And yeah, we were pretty close. And eventually she had a different set of beliefs, but she was a Mormon. And she invited me to the church that I go to. But before she did, she like asked me if I wanted to have like some classes with what they call missionaries. They're the ones that, if they're Mormons, they're the ones that may go to people's houses, just kind of knock. And so I said yeah. So I went to her house and I just kind of like let them teach me the first class. And then after the class was over, she asked me, "What did you think?" And I was like, "Oh, I liked it, you know." And the reason why I liked it because before that, in my mind, I would think like, how can God send people to hell? You know, because that's something pretty common that us as human, we probably can't comprehend. Yeah. But that's because I hadn't like read the Bible before. I didn't know about like sin, about things like that. So in my mind, I couldn't comprehend like hell and things like that. But the reason why I like what they taught me, the missionaries, was because they don't believe that people go to hell. They believe that they go to, there's something like that they believe it's like 3 different stages or levels of heaven.
Of heaven, yeah.
Yeah, so they believe that in the first one, that's where the Father is. The second level, that's where Jesus is. And the third one, the Holy Spirit. And they believe there's also something called spirit prison. That's like where people, they say that's where people who aren't Mormons, that they didn't get the chance to get baptized, they pretty much go there. But here on earth, we can, like the Mormons, they can, well, you know, Mormons, they believe that they can get baptized for a dead person so that eventually they can, like, in a sense, get out of, like, prison, the spirit prison, and then maybe go into one of those stages. I'm not sure. But yeah.
Can I pause you there real quick? Because I'm a huge visual person. So, like, as you're telling the story, I see the pictures of, like, how things are playing out in my head. And you said a lot as far as, like, going from, obviously, you're raised Catholic to you met this friend of yours who was Mormon, and then it took you on this whole tangent of, like, your belief system shifting towards, like, a Mormon ideology. And so let's backtrack, though, because what you say you were born into a Catholic family. Was this in Mexico or when you moved to America?
In Mexico,
in Mexico.
My grandma, she lived in Mexico, and she was Catholic. So
I
don't know about my grandparents, like great-grandparents. I don't know, but I'm assuming maybe. But yeah, my mom too, and so yeah.
So when you moved to America, was Texas the area you moved straight to, or did you bounce around between different states?
No, I think it was Texas, but we did go like different cities. Like I know one of them was probably Fort Worth, and another one maybe Arlington. Okay. And yeah, pretty much just different cities. And then finally in Irving, that's where I ended up growing for the most of my life. But now we're in Grand Prairie. So.
That's good. No, that's awesome. And so when you moved here, were you put in like any Catholic schools, any like prep schools that were like specifically Catholic oriented, or was it just public schools?
There's something. No, I was like in a regular school, but for the Catholic Church, I did go through that process where you do like there's different things. You take some classes, kind of. I don't know what they're called, but eventually you do like communion and then confession and things like that. So I went through those things.
Interesting. Yeah. Awesome. And so having the context now in the background, kind of building up to, obviously you stated that you were raised in a Catholic family. And then at a certain point, I'm assuming that your understanding of Catholicism, maybe the theology and whatnot, how adept would you say you were in like the belief systems, or how involved, or how much did you believe or practice the faith, and how much did your family even practice the faith? Like, how involved were they in a lot of the Catholic holidays, the Catholic events at the church? Were they super involved, or were they kind of Catholic by name only? The people who are just like,
I think it's more like that. We still did everything else. Like I said, those things that you do. I think even my mom, like, she got married through the church. Like, there's just different things that they do. But it was more like, we went to church, but we still live our lives just regular, pretty much.
Okay, got you. So would you say that the Catholic lifestyle was super imprinted as far as like your belief or your understanding, or it was just like God's kind of out there and, I'm a Catholic by name and trade, so, I'm supposed to do the X, Y, and Z. Was that kind of what you say your relationship was like that? Okay, awesome. So coming into this relationship with this Mormon, I'm assuming there wasn't a lot of, you knew the very general aspects of Catholicism, of Christianity in some regards about, why Jesus came, why Jesus died, and some of the core tenets when it comes to certain topics in our faith. like heaven and hell, right? That's I know that's a big one. So coming to this friend of yours who was Mormon, and what she was giving you, you viewed it from the perspective of, oh, this is better than what I understood, you know,
I think
heaven
it
and
was
hell
just
to be, right, in this case
because it was just about hell. I was like, I just in my mind I couldn't comprehend.
You couldn't comprehend it, no, 100%.
Yeah, like
now,
it was,
now continue from there, about that story with your friend and how that whole ideological shift happened and what that led to.
Yeah. So just real quick, when I was a Catholic, like I did believe in God. Pretty much the main thing that I knew, it was like I knew the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, and I knew heaven and hell, but I didn't know like why do people go to hell. I didn't know how can people go to heaven. I didn't know like salvation or any of that stuff. But yeah, now hearing something different, like with the Mormons, they like I said, they don't believe anyone goes to hell, pretty much, like any of that.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was the reason why I liked it, because I guess it was easier for me. but yeah, eventually like I started attending the church, the Mormon church. I think they call it like the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Something like that,
Yeah. So it's a little bit long, but yeah. So I started attending that, and eventually I became a member. I got baptized, and before I got baptized, I did have to go through like some 10 questions that they ask you before you get baptized. One of them is like just different stuff, I guess. 10 questions, and I guess after that you can get baptized, and then you have to like make sure that you're tithing and things like that. And after that, I got my, it's like a little paper with your name, that after that, now you have access to the temples that they have. Because they have church where anyone can go, but then they have certain temples where only certain people can go. So yeah, I was there, I was a part of it. And it wasn't until like one of those guys, the missionaries, and he just asked me, he was like, well, he told me, go and pray and ask God if the Book of Mormon is true. And that's something that Mormons tend to do. And most of them, they say that they prayed and they felt peace. And that's how they knew that it was true. So, but yeah, anyways, I just did what he told me. I went home. And then I think I had the Book of Mormon. And then I just asked God. God showed me if the Book of Mormon is true. And then I think it might have been the same day or the next day. But this Christian guy, he just messaged me on Facebook. I had never talked to him, but he was friends with my brothers, or they at least knew each other. And he pretty much just, we were talking, and then I asked him what he was doing, and he said he was reading the Bible. And I told him, I'm doing something similar. I'm reading the Book of Mormon. And then right there, he told me that has nothing to do with the Bible. So, and I remember when he told me that, I felt like a little bit offended, but I didn't tell him anything. I just, kept it cool. But in my mind, I was thinking like, I think it's best, like, if he just stays with what he believes, and I said what I believe in, then we can all be happy, pretty much like that,
So your dad, would you say your dad was like a pillar when it came to in your household? Because it's interesting, and that's why I asked earlier, like the involvement of your parents and in the church. It's what makes that more so of like a surprise and a kind of, if you want to look at it as a blessing from God, is that, if he wasn't as involved, and I'm pretty sure you probably understood the same thing, the generalities, but when it came to Mormonism, right, what you were speaking about, I think there's sometimes aspects where, conviction comes in, like, okay, this is not my belief system. And if my daughter is reading into this and saying this and such, and I don't believe it, regardless of, how dedicated he was, at least, him coming in and saying like, hey, he could have came in and not cared. Yeah. Right. Some parents do be like that. And so, but the fact that he was like, whoa, pause. I think that's a God moment that I don't want to just hop over and just, because I think that's really cool that he came in at an ideal time when you were going through and there are stories I've heard of kids who, there's actually one kid in specific who went off to college, got into this kind of Christian cult, had nothing to do with what the Gospels or even the Bible as, canonly understood, would preach about. But because she was away from family, she didn't have that person to interject in that, cult belief system. She got so deep in it to where when she went home, anything her parents told her regarding like how this is false, this is wrong, she pushed it off to the side and ended up, leaving her home, pursuing that, cultish belief system. And I believe like even to this day, like they have no like connection with her because she just stripped up and left because of, being entrenched in a belief, which is so easy to do because when you're young, right?
Yeah.
You're trying to formulate things, you're trying to understand things. And I think it goes to show, one, how we need accountability from different people, and not just to really get so focused on it's my way or the highway, right? Or come so tunnel vision that you don't, you think you're above critique, which is why I love having people in my life with different beliefs, right? We might disagree back and forth. I think that's okay. But when we have people who can at least submit something to us and we have the humility to receive it, I think that's what's going to put us on the path to truth and growth, and will keep us from harms of going down a specific, ideological slant. I think that's the only way. That's the right way, because I think where right is in between a lot of different. Well, obviously, where I think right is and truth is in scriptures, in the Bible, is in Jesus. But when it comes to conversations with other people who might not completely align, different denominations, for example, who might not align on everything, the truth is somewhere in the middle, right? Bible says in Ecclesiastes 7, I believe, he who fears God avoids every extreme. So being careful not to fall into different extremes, to bring it back to the point that it's just good that it's a God moment, that God brought your dad into that moment to kind of be like, whoa. Double check yourself.
Yeah, no, yeah. He definitely, I do believe, I know, well, I don't just believe, but I know my stepdad was a pillar that God did use him, because he came later on, after, I had asked if the Book of Mormon was true, and then that happened. And then later on, I was still going to, to the Mormon church. But then what I decided to do was something in me, or and I just decided to ask God, show me if this is really true or not, because I really want to know. At that point, it wasn't more like, no, I'm right. I'm in the right path. I'm okay. I'm good where I'm at. I'm happy. I was just I really wanted to know, because if it's not true, I want to know. And so, just pretty much, it was a simple prayer that I asked God to show me if it was true. Because, first I asked him with if the Book of Mormon is true. And then I just asked him from just the bottom of my heart. I really wanted to know if it was really true. And then, so my stepdad came in, and like I said, the next day my stepdad came into my room, and then he just said, I don't know why, but I woke up at 2 a.m. thinking about this stuff. And it was, I know it wasn't just a coincidence that he woke up at 2 a.m. But he told me the next day, he was just telling me what he was thinking at night, in the middle of the night. And he told me a lot of things that Mormons believe that I didn't even know that they believed. I think one of the things probably told me that, he told me, I don't remember, because it was years ago, so I don't remember exactly what it was, but I just know it was things that I didn't know. And whenever he was telling me that, I just stayed quiet. I didn't even say anything. But in my mind, I was like, God is answering my prayer. I know this is God answering my prayer, because it's not a coincidence. I asked God to show me if this is true or not. And then the next day, my stepdad comes into my room. He tells me all that stuff that he was thinking at 2 a.m. And so after he left, and then I was just okay. And after he left, I decided to go online and see if that was true, what he just told me. And the first thing that popped into my, on Google, that it was just a little cartoon, a video. And it was something about pretty much, or an animation that, it was something about if Mormons told you what they really believe when they came into your house. And then from there, I read different things. Well, not read, sorry. I watched different things that they were saying, that they believe that God has a wife. They believe that, this one I did know, but they believe that, how I told you that they can get baptized for the dead. And the other one that they told me was that they believe they can become gods and have their own planets. And I had no idea about that. I think I might have heard just a little tiny bit of it, but I didn't know to that extent where they can have their own planets and things like that. So I didn't know that. And then after I watched the video, I saw my friend again, and I just told her about that. And and all she told me was well, let's go with the missionaries and ask them about it. So we did, and then we just went to the church that they attend, and I just asked him do you believe this, that God has a wife, that pretty much everything I saw in the video. And they were telling me yes to everything. There were some things they were explaining to me. And I was okay, you know. I just, again, like I was just listening. I just wanted to confirm if all this was true. And you know, the missionaries, they confirmed it. So then we got into my friend's house. We were done with the conversation with the missionaries. And she asked me, what did you think? She was happy. I guess she was like, excited, like for me, like to see what I thought, or so, but I just told her, I was like, God does not have a wife. Like I was just like honest with her. I was just straight up. I was like, girl, God does not have a wife. And then
let me set the record straight.
Yeah.
I know you're excited that I received the message from Joseph Smith, I believe, is the head
that's
of
him.
Mormon theology. That I received this revelation from him. But when I received the revelation, I had to take a pause and look back and be like, hold on. This is more than I signed up for.
Yeah, pretty much, I thought it was more like
so
the
funny.
basis like about Jesus dying on the cross, but no, there was more.
There was more. You know, it was the heaven and hell that pulled me in.
Yeah.
But there was God's wife and all
pulled
these
me
other
out.
things that, was spinning right back out.
Yeah.
No, but that's funny. That's so funny.
Yeah,
Continue.
yeah. Okay.
Go ahead.
And then, but yeah, eventually, you know, like our differences, we weren't like, I guess, like compatible, like for being friends, because now I had this, like, I knew that God was only one God. I knew that God, that other people cannot become gods and stuff like that. Even though I had never read the Bible for myself, or I wasn't a Christian or anything like that, I still had a little bit knowledge, just because I said that I grew up in a Catholic home, and I know Catholics and Christians, they do believe in the same God. So I at least had, like, you know, a small idea.
Yeah.
But after that, like, I guess I was still interested, like, in finding the truth. And, you know, Jesus, he says in the Bible that he's the way, the truth, and the life. So I didn't know, but deep in me, I wanted to, I was looking for Jesus. I was looking for him. And, you know, the guy that I told you that he had messaged me, he would invite me to his church, even when I was still a Mormon. But then one day, the pastors, his parents were pastors, so they invited me to a retreat. Yeah. And after the retreat, they asked me if I had received Jesus into my heart. And I said yes, because, you know, I thought, just because, you know, I prayed to him, that I did. But they actually explained the gospel to me. They explained how you can get saved. One of the verses that I remember is the one that says that, it's in the book of John, where it says, he came to his own, but his own received them not. But to those who did receive him, he gave the right to become children of God. So they explained to me how we're not all children of God, but if you receive him, you can become a child of God. Good. So then at the end, they asked me if I wanted to receive him, and I said yes, because I had never, like, heard it in that way. So I said yes. And I said the sinner's prayer. I repeated after them. And I remember when I opened my eyes, like, I could see something different, like in the atmosphere. It was like a little gray, but peaceful. I don't know how to explain it, but there was a difference. And then, and before I got saved, when I was still a Mormon, I remember I used to make fun of Christians. You know, that guy, when he would invite me to his church, I would go. But then I would go with my friend after, and I would tell her, like, about how the music is so loud, and we would just make fun of it. She would say, like, oh, it's like a band, or, you know, things like that. So we would make fun of it. But after I was already saved, I went to their church again, and they had put a Christian song in Spanish. It was a Spanish one. And I remember as soon as they put that song, like, I felt something so beautiful. It was the presence of God. It was the Holy Spirit, because now that I was saved, the Holy Spirit lived in me. So I experienced his presence for the first time ever. And I had never felt that in my life before, like, not even in religion, in nothing. But after I actually had the relationship with God, with, like, you know, a father and a daughter relationship, that's when I experienced his presence. And I had never felt that before until I got saved.
That's so good. That's so good, man. I mean, and, you know, I think that's part of, you know, growing up with our faith. You know, sometimes you really don't know who Jesus is until that first encounter. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, I grew up in the church as well, very much so. But there was a certain point that I had to choose Jesus for myself, right? That he became real to me, that it wasn't just my parents' faith that I was riding the coattails of, but it was something that I truly believed in my heart, and that it was a relationship me and him need to begin together. And so I could remember those times in my life when I was younger where I would view Jesus and it's like, oh yeah, he's cool. He's the guy on the picture on the wall or the statue on the cupboard. And, we pray to him here or there, going to church, at some point too, making jokes like, oh, worship was loud, or, oh, we did this thing. It was so trivial. It wasn't important. But then the older I got, and when I had that point where I was like, Jesus, I want you to reveal yourself to me, not in just a sense of knowledge, but like experience your love, experience really what you did for me. Let that be not just a mind thing, but it connects to my heart and my soul and my spirit. And when that happened, how my view of a church changed, my view of how I'm supposed to seek God changed. Was I perfect? No, it was a gradual process of God really instilling these things into me. But I noticed a shift in how I want to be more intentional about how I display Jesus, how I share Jesus with other people, and my relationship with him. And so I think that's a very good point you brought out there that I just wanted to really emphasize on. And going back to, again, your family, would you say your family as of current is completely saved? Are they all chasing after Jesus? Or would you say you have some family members who are Christians, some who aren't? What's the state of your
So my family, I'm the only one who's Christian. I know my brother has had his personal encounters with God, but I know he needs to still follow him more and stuff. But I would say I'm the only Christian in my family. But I know God has told me that they are going to come to him. So I know eventually, just like it says in the Bible, that I believe in the Lord Jesus Christ and you and your household will be saved.
Good.
So that's a promise that we have from God. And that's something God has also personally told me.
That's good.
So yeah, I know eventually that they will come to
That's
Jesus.
Good. That's good. Hey, you got to be faithful.
Yeah.
Pray always.
Yes, definitely.
Right? And I think keeping, that in mind over family members that may not be saved, family members that are struggling with the idea of who Jesus is and what the gospel really is. I think the best thing you can do is, one, pray. The second thing is just continue to be that example of Christ working through you. I'll pray often Lord, let me be a vessel for your love and for your wisdom, because those around me are watching. And when I act in obedience to you, I'm going to expect those eyes that are on me to see Christ in me, right? And so, that's such a good thing and a good place to be. And I want to actually use this opportunity to pivot into my next question to you, which for the audience and people who might be unbelievers who are watching this, who have that, maybe there's someone who might be entertaining Jesus, entertaining the Gospels, and they're kind of tuned in to what that means to live a life for him. But live in a household that's not all put together. Right. For me, I was fortunate. I grew up in a Christian household. Thank God every single day, because if I didn't, where I'd be. I couldn't even tell you, but because I realized the struggles I had in my life, even growing up in a Christian household, it was a battle in and of itself. But not to get into too deep into that, but if I didn't have the backing of my parents who prayed every night for me and my siblings, who were just very stalwart in their pursuit of Jesus, making sure that we were in church every Sunday, regardless the season, regardless the circumstances, the church is your home. It's going to be your home, your second home. Home is home, but then church is also home.
Yeah, definitely.
Wherever you go, and don't you forget it. But if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be the man I am today. But in your circumstances, you were raised Catholic with parents who, were kind of Catholic in name, not necessarily devout or serious about it, knew the generalities of it, but yet in the midst of that, I'm assuming a lot of your siblings, like you said, as of currently, aren't really Christian. Those who were, some of your family members, not necessarily growing up in the ideal household for faith, but yet you are who you are today because of God's miraculous hand. What is your message to those who might be watching and might think that, if I do it, my life's going to be completely different, and it could be for the better, it could be for the worse? What's your message to that audience?
I would say do it. I'm not saying it's gonna be easy, but it's definitely gonna be worth it. And this is not coming just from someone I'm Christian, do it because it's the right thing, but no, because I lived through it. And I'll explain some things that I personally experienced. how it may not be easy at first, but it's going to be worth it, because when I was already a Christian, but at some point I did develop schizophrenia, a mental disorder. I couldn't control my thoughts, and that would make me, the stuff that I was hearing would make me scared. It would make me depressed. I got really depressed, and it was really bad. I was like that maybe for like a whole year. At some point I did attempt suicide, but I was going to attempt suicide, but I know God had saved me, and but then even though he had saved me, I was still like, dealing with the same stuff. I was still dealing with the same like fear, anxiety, hearing the same thoughts over and over in my mind. And like in a sense, I felt like I couldn't even like recognize myself anymore. So I was bad. But there was a point where there was a pastor that he was praying for me, and he was praying for me because of what I was experiencing. I don't know if you've ever seen, but when demons manifest in a person, that's what happened with me. So he was praying for me, and at the end, and that whole thing is, it's called deliverance. Maybe for some people that aren't familiar with it, it's called deliverance. It's something that Jesus did when he was on this earth. He would cast out demons from people, because demons tend to torment people with like, mental disorders, sicknesses, or just anything in their mind. Demons, that's what demons do. They oppress people and they torment people. But God still does that today, through people, through his servants, through any believer. And that's how I ended up being healed from that. God had healed me. The pastor was praying for me, and I was finally set free from that. And then I did tell my mom about it, like maybe a couple of days after I told her, but she didn't take it too well, because there was some other things that as I was getting delivered, there was other things that God had to break off from my bloodline as well. Some other things, including like idolatry, other stuff like witchcraft, and I kind of told my mom about that, but and like I said, she didn't take it too well, so she kicked me out, and yeah, so it wasn't like very easy at that moment, but eventually, I did come back. She wanted me to come back.
You had witchcraft. Sorry, I was still stuck on. Wait, so wasn't you doing witchcraft, or was it your family members? What was the whole witchcraft?
It was, I'd say, I think it's mainly like witchcraft, like coming down from my family members,
so,
like generations.
Generational.
I do remember I did practice like maybe one thing or two things, kind of like
wow.
I don't know. It was kind of like I don't know. It was like one or two things, yeah. But I also eventually got delivered from that. So because I didn't know what it was, I didn't know witchcraft involves demons, stuff from that. Yeah,
out of ignorance, you kind of practice it. That's crazy. No, that's awesome.
But yeah, she like I said, she did kick me out, and I did come. Like I said, I did come back eventually. And even though like I came back, she didn't like Christianity. She didn't like what I was doing and anything like that. But and even now, now I feel like she does try to, for us. We do have a great relationship, She understands that the path that I'm following it's a good path for me, but she doesn't want me to like try to tell others about it, like my family members. She doesn't like it, like if I try to share the gospel with them. I mean, even at some point, this was last year, I did share some with my cousin, my sister, another cousin, and my cousin's husband. They were all there, and I was just kind of sharing like a verse with them. And then like I guess at the end, like I don't know, my mom later on, she just told me like that I can't change people, to not try to change them. And I understand that I'm not the one who can change a person, it's only God. But I do have to be obedient, sensitive to the Holy Spirit, what he tells me. So if God tells me that I have to do that, then I will. Even just like it says in Ezekiel, like as for them, whether they hear or whether they refuse, you shall speak my words to them. So I have to be obedient to God. And so yeah, like I said, she doesn't like it, but she just wants me to keep it to myself. But it wasn't until like last year during in New Year's Eve, how we had the Echo Night, after I got back from that and I just went home, I saw that my mom, she was going to go to sleep. It was like maybe 1 a.m. and she was finally going to go to sleep. I was sitting in one of the chairs, and then I just saw her walking, and she was kind of limping, and like she wasn't walking right. And then like she was going into her room, and I asked my stepdad what's wrong. And then he told me something, and then I was like, oh, well, I'm going to go pray it out. So I just went after her, and then she was already in her room. And then I just asked her what was wrong. And she told me that she's been having pain for some time. And then I asked her, can I pray for you? And she was like, yeah. So she was open to the prayer. And then I just prayed for her that she would be healed, that for healing. And after we were done praying, we both said amen. And then I just went upstairs. And the next day, my mom, I was in the kitchen, and then my mom came into the kitchen. And she was like, guess what? And then I was a little bit scared. I thought she was going to tell me something about my dog, that my dog did something, So, I mean, my mom, I was like, oh, no.
Oh, no.
But
my dog.
Yeah.
Is she okay? Why are you running down here, Mom?
Right.
Slow down.
Yeah, no, I thought it was something to do with my dog. And then my mom told me, yesterday when you prayed for me, I got healed. And then I was like surprised. I was shocked, and I was happy. And then she just told me that as soon as I prayed for her, that the pain was gone. And and then after I left, my mom told my stepdad I got healed. And she was even walking, trying to see if her leg was good. And it was she was completely
Did
healed.
Did she know that you prayed for her?
Yeah. We whenever I had asked her, can I pray for you? We both prayed together.
Okay.
She was just she closed her eyes and we held hands. And I prayed for her, right there with her. So she knew. And then, but yeah, like I said, then I left after that. But yeah, when I left, my mom was just trying to see if her leg was healed, and it was. So when my mom was telling me about that, I was so happy. I was even kind of jumping because I saw that God healed her. And I feel like that definitely did make a difference. She still hasn't come to the Lord fully yet, but it definitely made a difference because she saw the power of God. She saw that what I'm in is not just another religion. It's not just this is right. No, it's Jesus. It's real, yeah. And then even later on, my mom finally told me, she was like, because my brother, he's dealing with drugs, addictions, and stuff like that. But she told me, can you pray for your brother, for him to be to not have those addictions anymore? So I did pray, and I even I was praying with him right there, and I even prophesied over him. And then later on, my other brother, he's currently not here, and he's actually in prison at the moment. But we went to go visit him. After that, we went to go visit my other brother, and then my mom, she's now asking me things she told me, what do you think about do you believe that people's kids pay for what their parents did? If the parents didn't fully pay what they the evil stuff that or crimes or anything like that.
That's what you're saying, yeah.
She told me, do you believe that now? Yeah. And I told her it's not necessarily that the parents didn't fully paid for what they did, but it's actually a generational curse. I told her about how I told her about a verse which is in Exodus that just like you said, that is a generational curse, but that Jesus can break those things. So, and the reason why she was asking me that was because my dad, my biological dad, he was in prison. So now she saw that my brother was in prison, and it's that cycle. And I just explained to her that it can be broken off. So, but I told her that in order for my brother, it would be good to first, most important for him to receive Jesus so that he can have that freedom. So yes. So after my brother, because at first my brother was just getting something, I don't know, when we were visiting him, but he came back again. And then I just, my mom told him a little bit about that, and I explained to him more. And then after that, I just asked him here, let's just do a prayer so you can receive Jesus. And he did. And then after that, I just began telling him, I'm going to say some things, you just repeat after me. And it was breaking off any generational curse, declaring that it's not going to be passed down into his children, and things like that. We were just breaking off things from him. And my mom was the one, who wanted me, who was actually asking me about that at first before we actually did that. So now God is slowly working in her heart to the point after, after she had gotten healed, now she's asking me about things. She's telling me to pray for this or that, even though she hasn't fully given herself to Jesus yet. But, that's just planting seeds, and it's going to be God who's going to eventually change her heart. So,
that's so good.
So that's my the reason why I share all of that, because if a person, anyone that's watching that doesn't, who may be feeling afraid of what their family is going to think or what they're going to say, I would say still do it. And then God is going to show himself in a great way through whoever's thinking about, following Jesus, but isn't sure. I know God can do great things. And for some people, some parents or family members, they may not care. Others will, but just stay strong, remain in prayer, read the Bible, because the Bible really renews our minds. It helps us see things differently, so that we don't have to be worrying about what other people are going to think, because we know what the Bible says. And another important thing is also attending a good, a Christian church. And that helps out a lot, because even if your family members are not Christian, you at least have spiritual family members that are going to help you out in your walk. And that's another great way to learn about Jesus. So go for it. And the verse again, the one that I said earlier, that it says, believe in the Lord Jesus Christ and your household will be saved. That's a promise from God. So even if someone's family members don't know about Jesus yet, they will eventually. So
that's good. That's good. And man, life is complex.
Yeah.
Life is not as easy. We all don't start from the same place. But even though life is complex, when you come to Jesus, and the beautiful thing, I'll speak to my own faith, my walk, is that you see how God orchestrates things so beautifully. And that's something that you look back and you give thanks for. That's where your thanksgiving, your gratitude, because no matter how unideal the circumstances were when you started in your walk with Jesus, your walk of sanctification and just becoming more Christ-like, you look back and you're like, man, what comes to mind is that one song by Marvin Sapp, never would have made it without you. So it's it's one of those things where you look back and you just see how God is just orchestrating things bit by bit, right? The pieces where at one point you would have never thought your mom would come to the realization that your faith is more than just you coming and talking about Jesus, that there's power in his name. There is deliverance. There is protection. There is aid, wisdom that's given when you seek Jesus and with all of your heart, mind, and soul and body. And now you're seeing that obviously in, your brother and whatnot. And what also came to mind was when you were speaking about the generational curses, the things that, tend to be a result of what the parent might do, that the kid's going to end up following suit, which is a picture, honestly, that the Bible tries to help us understand, is that if you do something in rebelling against God, if you live a selfish lifestyle, right, to where you always want to please yourself, whatever you might not see as a consequence in the moment will consequentially hurt. Either it can be someone else. If you have kids, it can be your kids, it could be your family members. It's going to trickle and affect those around you. On the opposite, if you're someone who is pursuing all that is good, and I recently had a podcast episode talking about this with one of my guests, where I spoke to, how my family, my dad was kind of like that spark of, all right, if no one else was, but if no one else in the family was going to pursue God, I could have grown up right now being a child who believed in whatever. Could be in Islam, could be in Hinduism, could be in Buddhism, who knows? But my dad and his family started that spark, and God saved him. So, all glory comes from God, but saved him. And his pursuit over time, and he has a big family, infected into every one of his brothers and sisters, to where now, again, I'd say 99%, if not 100%, is Christian to some degree in that realm of understanding. But it starts with one person, right? And so, again, speaking to you and your faithfulness, again, it might not look like much now, but as you keep being faithful, watch God do things around and start to change the generational, I don't want to say curses at this point, but just the things that could cause future generations, when you have kids, when you have a family, that down the line, they're not going through the same process that my grandparents did or my parents did, right? But they're pursuing a path that is pushing them towards Jesus and not away from him.
Yeah.
And so that's so good that you brought that up. And I think the audience needs to understand that. And when you come to Jesus, you'll be grateful you did.
Yeah.
Like you and I can't say that enough, and I can say that all day, is how thankful I am when I look back every single time of what God's brought me through and what he's continually taking me through. Because I think the Christian walk is a daily thing. It's a daily thing.
It is, yeah.
But when you can really look at the small and the big things God does in your life over each day and just say, God, thank you for this, thank you for this, you're constantly reminded that he's working, that he's still present. The same God that saved you how many years ago, and after that experience is still present and is still working on you and is still walking with you through the trials and the tribulations. Now, I wanted to now pivot into, before we get into your pursuit as a healthcare worker, because I want to touch on some things there, I want to also get into where would you say your faith with Jesus is right now, right? You spoke to how you got to Jesus and kind of the effects of how you've been walking with Jesus has been on your family, but how would you describe your relationship with Jesus right now?
I feel like at this moment it's more about like there's times where it's, like, oh, so amazing. But there's also times where, like, we experience, like, trials and tribulations. And at the moment, I feel like it's more about, like, God forming me. Because something I had told him probably, like, last year was, like, I began telling God, like, take anything away that's not pleasing in my life. Anything that's in me, that you don't like, I don't want it either. So I even told him, like, made me go through things so that those things can be removed from me. And the reason why I do that was because there was a point, before that, where I was still, even though I live, I have a relationship with Jesus, there were still things that I hadn't, like, surrendered to God. It was still things that, it was more about, like, me, more about my own needs and stuff like that. But God began to show me how it's important to also, like, when it comes to serving him, it's important to not just think about us, but others as well. So, and then I feel like that really made a difference in me. So after that, that's when I began telling God, like, take anything away. And I feel like that's what he's doing with me at the moment. He's like more like molding me and forming me. And he's allowing me to see, the power that is in me as a Christian, because God gives us authority. And I feel like that's what he's wanting to reveal to me, that I can just command things to leave, to change and stuff like that. I don't have to be living with the same kind of stuff. And I can make a difference simply with, declaring the word of God. And I feel like that's what he's wanting to do in me, to know, like, the authority that's in me, and just pretty much helping me grow as a Christian so that I don't remain the same. So it can be a little bit challenging, but it's honestly worth it at the end as well. It's because it makes me like a better me, I guess. So yeah, I think it's good, at the moment, even though that's going on. But I think it's great because there's nothing outside of God. There's nothing better. So no matter, like, the season, I think it's great. So
good. That's so good. So healthcare. Why healthcare?
So that's actually something that I thought that I decided, but it was actually at the same time God doing it. So because God predestines us, and he's the one who chooses, like, what he wants us to, the ways that he wants to use us. So originally, when I first started college, I was thinking of going into psychology, right? And the reason why I wanted to do that, because even before I was a Christian, well, I wasn't even a Christian at that moment yet, but even before that, like, there was a lot of people that would come to me. I would give them, like, great advice that really helped them. Even this girl, like, one day she just messaged me and I helped her out, and after that she didn't talk to me, so she just wanted, like, the the advice.
Yeah, the advice. That's all.
And I didn't mind. Yeah. And but I really enjoy helping people, and something that I even began to notice is, like, people, when they experience, like, difficult things in their childhood, it affects them as an adult, as even their teenage years. It affects them because the childhood is a moment where people can be vulnerable, where people can learn different things, and that can, like, kind of create an impact. What they live in their childhood, it creates a big impact of who they will be, I guess, in the future. And like I said, I noticed that with a lot of my friends that I had, that most of them experienced the same thing as in their childhood, and they dealt with, like, things, as they grew up, they dealt with certain things. And I saw that pattern. And just seeing how that works, like the mind, how it's really powerful.
Yeah.
That's what interested me into going into psychology at first. But my stepdad, he has 3 sons, like not with my mom, but he has 3 sons. And one of his sons is a nurse. And my stepdad, he didn't really want me to pursue psychology. I wanted to be a psychologist, but he was kind of trying to talk to me into being a nurse. And I didn't, even though he was telling me how nurses, they get paid well and things like that, I didn't want to be a nurse because I had been a nurse assistant before. I kind of had an idea since I worked with like other nurses at that moment. So I kind of had a good idea of what they did, even though it's a great career, they get paid well. It's a great career.
I'll say being a nurse is definitely a calling. I have a buddy of mine who was a nurse for several years. He actually just recently got his degree as a nurse practitioner. And man, if I could tell you the days that this man would call me, griping about it, man, this is tough. Obviously he loves doing what he does, loves his patients and whatnot, but there's just some days those patients will push you over the edge and you're sitting there like, man, why did I choose nursing? and so, several funny stories came out of just his experiences as a nurse. But that being said, it's definitely a calling. Healthcare in general, I'd say to all our healthcare workers, I commend the heck out of you, honestly, because it's like hospitality is pushed to the extreme when you're in healthcare because at the end of the day, what's most important is that patient's life. Right. This isn't just like a retail store where the customer is always right. And, you can, sometimes you can put your foot down. But with a patient, it's like if they're grumbling, then they're angry, but they're in pain. You got to do everything to alleviate that pain. And that might mean humiliation. That might mean long nights, long days, which is why I have like the utmost respect and a deep appreciation for our health workers because, y'all are the bedrock of, our society, right? Good health, happy life, And so I can understand that like hesitancy because I actually at one point there was a pursuit to become a doctor for me. And I remember actually going in and interning with an orthopedic surgeon. And mind you, this decision to become a doctor was, I think, funny enough, midway through my sophomore year in college. I was like, because I was already on the like biomedical engineering route. And so I was kind of in this healthcare, but yet engineering space. And it was like, what route do I want to go? But that kind of was like, maybe this is where I want to try pursuing. Came midway through my college years. And so when I was interning with this orthopedic surgeon, as well as a cardiologist, I interned with 2 of those specialties.
That was when you were in school?
When I was in college. When I was in college, during the summer period, I did a little internship. And I remember asking the doctors one question that shifted the whole trajectory. I apologize. That's a lot of syllables in one word. But that shifted my whole mindset when it came to medicine and pursuing that was, when did you know you wanted to become a doctor? Right? Because at my point, I was still kind of finicky left and right. Should I pursue it? And I'm not saying that it's not possible at that point to choose like, hey, I want to become a doctor or I want to do this or I feel this is what my calling is. Power to you if that's clear to say at that point. But for me, I was kind of on that fence. And so I remember asking the cardiologist and the orthopedic that question, and both of them gave me a response. I knew from the minute I was like 7, 6 years old, when I was a kid, I knew this is what I wanted to be. And so I kind of took a berry back and I questioned myself as like, do I want to pursue this because of maybe my family? Because when you grow up in a Nigerian household, sometimes it feels like, the routes are very limited. It's you're a lawyer, you're a doctor, or you're an engineer, right? One of those like big 3. Anything outside of that is you better know that you're playing to succeed. You're going to bring in some dough with that. But that being said, it really made me double back and think like, okay, do I really want to do this? Because like I said previously, the healthcare profession definitely is a calling because you're getting more of yourself, more than what you're going to be paid and compensated for sometimes. And so the fact that you brought that up, that you're having that realization, like, nursing, I've seen nurses. For me personally, I've experienced, the amount of stories and what my buddy has gone through, to where, he's trying to now kind of shift into a more management type role where he's not always direct with patients, but he's, at least managing over because he feels like that's more where his giftings are. But, he has to go through the steps. You got to get your reps in regardless. And when you get your reps in, it only, going through that for him, I know that helped grow him in his character and his knowledge and understanding of what it takes. And I think a lot of us need to go through that before we're put into positions where then we're now overseeing people and managing things like that. Because no one wants, in most cases, you don't want a manager that's just, their role by name, but has actually experienced it to some degree, right? And so, as a side tangent to nurses, we appreciate you, we love you, and we want to give you your props.
And
but that's not what Stephanie decided to choose for the same reasons that were just stated. So speak more onto now where that pushed you towards then.
Okay, so after my stepdad was telling me that, it's like, okay, at the end I was like, then I don't know what to do because my stepdad wants me to do this, but this is what I wanted to do. So what I did, I was just like, I'll just take a semester off, just try to think like, what exactly is it that I want to do? And it was almost time to, after I had took the semester off, then it was almost time to start the new semester. But before that, my sister at that moment, she had recently had a baby. And then she just like randomly mentioned about her boyfriend, how he wanted to become a sonographer because whenever he would go to the appointments to see the baby, when my sister was still pregnant, he said that he really enjoyed it and that's what he wanted to do. And as soon as I heard that, it's like there was like a light bulb or something in my mind. Yeah. And then I was like, that's what I want to do. In my mind, I was like, I just knew that's the right one.
Yeah.
And I even imagine like in my mind, like, it's still healthcare, but at least it's more like not too working under pressure, even though I guess now that I am studying for sonography, I do know that there's still, it's still healthcare. You still gotta, go with it. But at least it's still like, I guess, more calm, I would say, depending on what you're going. Because there's like different like things that you can register or things that you can receive as a sonographer. Like you can go into abdomen, OV, vascular, or all of them. But so if you're in general like abdomen, you're still gonna like be with sick patients because what we're doing, we're diagnostic medical sonographers. We're trying to find pathology. Yeah. So we're still gonna be with patients that aren't feeling well and stuff like that. But yeah, I still knew like before, with my sister when she mentioned that, I knew that's what I was gonna do. So that's what I'm pursuing now. And right now I just recently started my OB rotation, so that's something that I when I see the babies in the womb, like on the screen, like I just feel like that's so beautiful, like cool. Seeing God's creation and seeing how the babies move. And recently I don't know, I even see their faces and it's just like and their feet, and it's just like one of the most beautiful things that I've seen.
That's good. Yeah. That's good. You're funny enough, and I run into two people. The people who like will acknowledge I'm a science guy, so maybe it's just my perspective, but it's babies are beautiful. I think from when they're conceived to when they're birthed. But at the same time, babies, when we talk about the aesthetic, when they're coming out the women, and we're not gonna get too graphic for saying this is not about. If you want more specifics on this stuff, go watch a medical podcast, medical channel. You're not gonna get that here. But when they come out, they aren't necessarily the most cleanest. It's not the most cleanest thing. And so I remember a buddy of mine actually, saying like, man, why do people think babies are so cute when they come out the womb? Like why would this? Like sometimes, and then I question: is it like more so just the idea, obviously when a baby's birth, it's a beautiful thing, right? And then that's sometimes we like put it as, from when they're born and whatnot. And I'm not saying that this is your case. Obviously, you're someone who loves the science aspect and you also have a deep appreciation for how God constructs things. And I'm not saying that the person who says that they don't look as pretty or beautiful as, the other person is necessarily, if the heart obviously is malicious, it's malicious. But if they're saying it from the place of like, aesthetically, I can understand why you say, okay, they're not the prettiest looking, any baby, whether it's an animal or a human, right? And when they come out, they're just like, oh, they're trying to figure out life, and you're trying to, when they're clean up, obviously, and you're holding them like, that's when, and they grow a little bit into their bodies, that's when you're like, oh, I see it now. But, that's just something that pops into my head because, I remember having a conversation and my buddy was just like, babies do not look pretty when they come out, but yet, I feel like more people are not. Or it's like, oh, they're so beautiful. And obviously they're beautiful, but are we talking about the aesthetic beautiful, or are we just talking about it's just beautiful, because they're babies?
Probably
and,
a beautiful moment, even
beautiful
though they're...
moment.
Yeah.
You just conflating the two. So no, that's what just came back to mind. No, you said that, I'm like, oh yeah. Man, no, I think they're beautiful from start to finish. God's hand, you can see it from the beginning to the end. But it also, therefore, wants you to push into the question of like, you spoke about how, obviously what got you to sonography and this appreciation you have for babies, which is awesome. But is there like a spiritual reason too tied to it?
So I did mention, but I didn't really go into detail.
Yeah.
So after I was, after I was already heading to that path, I was like starting my prerequisites for that. I was still taking anatomy, and during that time, that's when I had, like I mentioned earlier, I had developed schizophrenia. And I was just really depressed. Like I said, I didn't recognize myself. I would look at myself in the mirror, and I could just see, like, in my eyes, it's like I didn't feel, like, alive. In the sense, I even felt like sometimes when I would just walk, I would feel like I was more like, just a robot, like, feeling dead from the inside and just walking with really nothing in me. Yeah. So I was just really depressed at that moment. And I even thought about, like, how I don't want, like, my kids to suffer like I'm suffering. No. So I was like, I don't want to have kids. I wasn't pregnant or anything, but I decided, I was even having that idea of like, I want to get a surgery so that I make sure that I don't have kids at all, because I don't want them to come into this type of world where I'm over here suffering, and I don't want the same for my kids. So I had that in mind. But, after God healed me, before I get into that, there was a time where this girl, I went to a church, and this girl, she was sitting next to me, and we were kind of like, they were teaching us about how to give words of knowledge, things like that, things that God reveals. And something that the girl that was sitting next to me, that she mentioned, was that God was going to change my heart to want kids. And then whenever she said that, in my mind, like, I was like, that's not really what I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear something else, like, about me, about what I was going through, not really about the kids. But now I understand, because after God healed me, I began to have that love again for kids, because I had that love like way before that. But God gave that to me again, because I really love kids. I can love a kid that's not my own. I can love them as my own, even if it's someone else's kids, like my nephews, my nieces. I love them, or even just a stranger's kids. Like, I just think they're so cute. So God eventually put that in me again. And when I had that idea about going into sonography, it was actually God doing it all along, because there was a point where I was taking my prerequisites, but then I thought maybe I just wanted to do something else, or maybe God had something else for me. But this lady, she told me that she didn't want to tell me. She wanted God to tell someone else to tell me, because I already knew the lady. Maybe in her mind she was thinking like, if she's the one telling me, that I'm going to think like, no, it's just more like your opinion, or for whatever reason, she didn't want to be the one to tell me. So she brought me to someone else, to another lady, to pray for me. And she was waiting, the first lady was waiting for the second lady to reveal, for God to reveal that to her. But I guess she didn't. So then the other lady, the first lady, she decided to just be honest with me, tell me what God wanted to do in my life. That she told me, you need to go back to what you were studying for, because God is going to use you to help women who are considering abortion. And after that, I was like, I became obedient, and I went back, and then I applied, and now I'm in the program and everything. And something that I saw, like I said, I didn't have kids, but I don't have kids yet, like I wasn't pregnant. But I did go through that experience of like, maybe what a pregnant woman may think, like they may not want to bring their kids in this world for whatever reason. Some of them could be because financial reasons. Another one would be because maybe they don't have the support from their family, even the dad of the child. Another reason could be like me, like, they're maybe not mentally right at the moment. They're dealing with depression. Yeah. They're dealing with things like that. But God calls us to be the light in the darkness. Yep. When people are experiencing things like that, God wants to use us to bring light to them, to comfort them. And that's what I'm planning on doing, because often in society we just hear that, just have an abortion and your problems are going to be solved. But it doesn't end just there, because there's actually some women who experience regret, some women who maybe didn't have depression, now they have depression because they probably felt like they lost something, or maybe they just regret their decision. So people often say that the solution is just to get an abortion, but they don't talk about all the other resources that are out there that can help them. And that's kind of what I want to head into. Like, I want to be able to pray for them. I want to let them know that they're not alone. I want to let them know that their child has a purpose, that even if it's not easy at the moment, it's going to be better at the end. And just like me, when I was depressed, it was not easy at all. But I see what God brought me out of, how God helped me, how he was there the whole time, even when I felt like he wasn't. So that's what I want to bring into the other people's life. Just bring the love of Jesus with that person, because I know God can change a person's heart, and just for them to truly experience the love of God. Because I know in sonography, sometimes sonography is a really great tool to, like I was saying earlier, to find pathology, in patients that are sick, and the other one to for patients to see their baby when it comes to OV. But sonography can also be used, in abortions. Like, let's say, like, it's not because there was any kind of complication, or maybe just simply because maybe the mother decided to abort. Sometimes sonography, they use ultrasound so that they can see where the doctor, is inserting whatever they have to remove the baby. But for me, it's the other thing that I want to do. I want to use sonography so that people can see their child, because whenever I see the babies in the womb, I just find it so beautiful. And I think I may be wrong, I don't know, but I think like, what's that thing called? Planned Parenthood? Planned Parenthood, yeah. I think I've heard stories, I'm not sure, but I heard stories where in abortion clinics they don't show the baby. They don't want them to see, because they, of course not, they want they want them to believe, it's just a clump of cells. It's just that they don't want them to see it's alive. But a lot of mothers, if they see really like their babies on the screen, that itself can just change their heart, because they see that it's a baby. And that's what I want to do. And not just for them to just have the baby, but also to help them after, to have someone that they can feel like is supporting them. So that's what I'm planning on doing. So that's awesome. And however God wants to do it, that's how I'll be doing it.
Yeah, and that's good that you're staying humble and obedient to that. And that's so good, everything you did say, regarding, I remember when I saw my first video of how an abortion was carried out, and I was like, And funny enough, I also worked in a lab at one tenure in my career, and there was actually a little fetus in a bottle, and because abortion and all that kind of stuff, and so it's one of those things where when you see those things, you really understand the gravity of life, for me personally, and how deleting a baby is in it. There's and I'm not saying any of this to undermine the mother that might be going through a specific circumstance, or might be in a situation that is less than ideal. I understand that completely. As we spoke about earlier, how life for each and every one of us is never ideal. We all start in different circumstances in different places. But the beautiful thing when we come to Jesus, how God can really just orchestrate things as you be obedient to him, as you seek his ways, how he can make everything beautiful, even though it might look tough for the season that you're in. Pertains to the same thing. It's that same mindset, that same approach that I apply to a certain topic such as this, when we talk about deleting babies, and for whatever your reasons are as a mother, that's a life that you're taking away. I've heard so many stories of people who if it wasn't for God, right, they would have been, gone, right? And so it makes you like wonder, like if the mother, sometimes maybe sometimes it's the father and the mother involved in this decision making, but if they really understand what they're doing when they do that, not just from a scientific medical standpoint, but from a legacy standpoint, from their ability to have a chance or a shot, because when we understand conception, that's God orchestrating that child in the world. That's God's child in a sense, right? Where being made in God's image, right? And you're playing God in that regard by taking that life away, right? And not letting Him finish His work and allow that to fully draw out. And obviously, there's going to be the people who are going to clap back, and that's something I stand 10 toes down on. I don't really care what your emotions or feelings are about it. I love you regardless, right? No matter how you feel. But like I said, when it comes to life, that's something that's so sacred, so beautiful. I think we need more people like you, and that's awesome that you're pursuing a field to really bring that to light, and stand, again, 10 toes down for a position like that, because you are going to get a lot of people who are going to clap back at you about that. There's whole organizations out there already doing their best to kind of come against that, however they will. But I strongly believe when you stick firm to God's ways, you're not going to trip or fail, or you're going to encounter the persecution, but it's not going to stick to you. It's all going to kind of just fall off the wall, because His ways, His foundation is sturdy. Everything else crumbles. Yeah, right. The saying goes, "Truth doesn't need to defend itself." When people encounter the true and living God and what He calls of us to be aware of, to follow and be obedient to, nothing else matters. And I think your obedience to making that truth known to the mothers who might be going through it and feel like that's the best option, and saying no, there's other ways. And even not even that there's other ways, but look at the life of the baby. Look at the heartbeat. Look at how it's being formed, right? That it's something more than just your emotions, your temporary feelings, right? Because emotions are temporary, but our decisions we live with. That's something that we need to understand, is that just because I feel this way one day, and I might feel this way for a week, months, right? It will die off. It will die off. You will change, right?
Because we, regardless whether we're pregnant or not, every single human being, we all go through things. So just like you were saying, like it gets better.
It gets better. I actually remember there was a friend of mine who actually did carry out, went through a process where an abortion was carried out. And I remember talking with him. This was like years ago, but him talking about it, and he started getting emotional as like this sense of regret. And I remember seeing his face where I was like, this is when we talk about why we stand so firmly for it, and why no one can tell me otherwise, right? And why no one can convince me otherwise on this issue, is because of that face. Every time I think about that topic, I see his face of regret, and I'm like, from one aspect, it's because there's ignorance, there's a lack of knowledge, right? The Bible, when it speaks to my people perish for a lack of knowledge, right? And I think it's one of the books of the prophets. But ignorance can sometimes be our greatest enemy, and can cause us the most pain and turmoil if we're not careful to seek God's wisdom. And that's why one of the great books in the Bible, Proverbs, and all the wisdom literature around there, is just so good to constantly just and feed yourself. The word in general is good to just feed yourself every single day. But when I think about wisdom, obviously I'm pinpointing books like Proverbs and stuff like that, and I try and always get myself a proverb or a psalm in each day to really just reflect and meditate on. And I realize what that does for my mental, my emotions, how I feel, how I view the day. And at the same time, it teaches me to, again, seek His ways, because His ways are best, regardless of how I feel, because how I feel can flip and flop, but I know His word remains the same. So, that's so good, though. That is so good. Man, I want to get to this next topic, but we are running a bit long. I got another appointment here soon I got to get to. But I do want to kind of like close out on where do you think, let's see, more so in the healthcare space that you're pursuing, what's something that in your process of going that route you are learning, having been through different rotations that much and the such, when you talk about going through clinicals, seeing different things, and I know obviously you're not only doing like OBGYN clinicals specifically, but you're also doing different areas. Yeah. What are some of the things that you're learning life-wise, but also specifically to your medical field, just different things that you're learning along the process that God's teaching you, even in all these different environments and settings that you're in?
Something that I notice is like I feel like hospitals or clinics nowadays they tend to leave God away. Some do honor God, but others don't. But what I've been seeing is like, I'm in my, general science, I've been around patients that are sick. Some of them that have pain, they've been having pain for a long time. They don't know what's going on. Mm-hmm. And people that are just sick, maybe possibly even dying. And me as a Christian, it's like, I can't be like, surrounded by these people and not do anything about it. So what I started, just doing out of obedience, just praying for people. Also doing the same thing, being the light, knowing that God can heal them, planting seeds. Because I feel like God really wants healthcare workers that are, Christians. God wants them to, just wake up and realize that they're surrounded by patients that really need to hear about Jesus. Even if they don't know Jesus, they're surrounded. There's been times where I pray for people and they, for some of the patients, and they're like, you're the first person that has ever prayed for me in here. And that just kind of like touches my heart because it's like I was able to make a difference. But I'm also thinking like, I'm sure I'm not the only Christian in that hospital or clinic. So it's like, it would be nice if like other Christians also began to doing the same thing. And I know there's some of them, of course. I follow this girl and this lady, she talks about that. And she's teaching other Christians to do the same thing. Yeah. And so that's one of the main things that I've seen. And then just in general, maybe some other things that I've learned is just the ability to be surrounded with people that are different from me, since I'm always across like all kinds of people. So it's just, I feel like it's really important, to just be around different kinds of people, patients, or even the people that work there. I feel like it's great to just surround myself with, to know more about how people think, the way that they kind of like, how they're different, just pretty much. Because sometimes some patients may just give their whole stories and stuff like that. And then, but also with like the people that work there, I can talk to them. They tell me about themselves. So I feel like just in general in life, I think it's great just meeting new people that are different, especially because I go to different sites every semester. So that's just something small. But
so I know that, and this is actually something that I want to talk about, because I think it's another good topic that just popped in my head. But when it comes to like the restriction of like sharing faith in the healthcare space, because I think talking to my buddy of mine who is in healthcare, some of my buddies, when it comes to like sharing your faith in a healthcare setting, just like, how they say they remove God out of schools and whatnot, but even in the healthcare space, like your ability to like pray for people or even share your faith about Jesus or, come with that approach in that setting can kind of look like, you're kind of being persecuted for that. What are your, from what you've experienced, because again, I haven't been in a hospital setting all too much, in that kind of capacity at least. What are your thoughts on that, and how do you view like kind of your ability? Do you feel like there's a restriction on your ability to talk about Jesus in a hospital or in a clinic, or do you kind of have this openness? What's kind of the state of affairs there?
So I know like it's kind of like more like a spiritual. The enemy doesn't want people to hear the gospel. He doesn't want people to come to Jesus, stuff like that. So I see it more like as not just my natural eye saying like, oh yeah, it has to be this way, but I see it spiritually that I know it's the enemy that doesn't want God's word to reach other people. And even I even experienced that like it's like persecution, because in my first clinical rotation, that's when I first started like praying for patients. But then eventually like I don't know what happened, but then someone told my teachers, and then I ended up getting in trouble for it. And then so I stopped and I decided to pray. And I just asked God, like, what should I do now? Because I know that's something God does want me to do just anywhere, not just necessarily in hospital settings. But at the same time, I don't know, because, these people are in power. They do have the ability to tell me that I can't be there no more, or stuff like that. So I just wanted to ask God to see what I should do. And it took a while, but then finally God answered me. So I'm attending a theology school. It's just through Zoom now. When I first started, it was, in person. But now that I'm doing the other one, the next degree is through Zoom. But it's still great. But that day that I was going to have the class through Zoom, I already knew I was going to have the class, but I was like, I'm just going to go to sleep. I'm so tired. Like, I can skip even though I had never, really skipped a class or anything like that.
Yeah.
But this time it's like, I'm just going to go to sleep. I know I have class, but I need to go to sleep.
Yeah.
But then, I know God, there's been times that God wakes me up. Sometimes, let's say maybe I didn't hear my alarm or something. God uses something, like someone, to make a noise, and it wakes me up. And that's what he did that same day, to wake me up so that I can wake up. But I already knew that it was him, even though it was someone else, like another person, like this girl that's living there at the moment. But I recognize the way God speaks to me. But then I was like, I'm still going to sleep. And then this time, the second time, God literally, I felt him waking me up. I felt him physically. And then I was like, okay, God, I know you want to speak to me, so let me get up. And then I connected to the class. And the lady that was teaching it at that moment, she began sharing. I believe it was from the book of maybe Nehemiah. Yeah, that one. How I think he was building something for God, but at the same time he was receiving threats from two people.
Wall. Yeah, the wall they were building. Yes.
But Nehemiah, he still remained faithful to God. He still was doing what God had called him to do, despite any kind of threats, things like that. He was still doing it, and just hearing everything, I could recognize that God was speaking to me regarding about what I had been praying about, to just keep doing. And it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter whatever they do. I know God's purpose is going to be what truly gets fulfilled, And so I just continued, and that's what I'm doing now. And to this point, I'm still doing it. And I know, let's say if something does happen, I believe God can deliver me. He'll protect me because I'm obedient to him. Some of the scriptures, I'm not going to lie, I did experience fear, of doing it. But I had meditated on Daniel, on the scriptures where King Nebuchadnezzar, he pretty much said that they can only worship the thing that he built, the idol or whatever, the god that he built.
Yeah.
And if anyone didn't worship that one whenever they heard the music and stuff like that, that they were gonna be thrown into the fire. But even though that happened, the other Hebrew guys, I think it was 3 of them.
Yeah.
Okay, they didn't worship the idol, the false idol, and they remained faithful to their God. And so they were thrown into the fire because of that, because they were faithful to God. But you could see how Jesus was there and he delivered them. No, nothing harmed them.
Yeah.
They didn't even smell like smoke or anything.
Yeah.
And the same thing with Daniel, when they made that law, I guess you can call it, that they can't go to anyone else other than to the king, I believe. So for 30 days, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And even though that happened, Daniel, he still left his. What amazed me was that when he prayed to God after that, that law was passed, he had his window open. He didn't even feared or anything that anyone would see him. It was still open, and he still prayed to God. And when that happened, when that happened, he was thrown into the den of lions. But then God delivered him. Obviously, he didn't get hurt. The lion, God sent, I believe, he sent his angel. And then after the next day, when he came out, and then they threw the other ones who pretty much, I guess you can say, snitched on Daniel. Yeah. You could see how the lions devoured those people. So when we're faithful to God and just continue listening to to his voice and being obedient to him, I know whatever happens, I'm in God's hand, he'll deliver me, he'll protect me. So, and what I truly care, it's not necessarily about no, I'm not going to listen to you, the people. It's more about that's not really what how I'm doing it, but it's more like I care about people, I care about the patients that I'm in.
Yeah.
I care about the things that they're going through.
Yeah.
And I care about, their eternity. So that's the reason why I do it, because we all, when we die, there's just two places, heaven or hell.
Mm-hmm.
But I care for them. I want them to come to Jesus. So that's
good.
why I continue doing what I'm doing,
That's
just
so
out of
good.
obedience, and because I just truly care for their health, because I don't want them to suffer, with sicknesses, but also for their soul, because I care like where they end up where they spend their life in eternity.
So what I'm gathering from all of that is that, you can still be obedient and faithful. And I think the beautiful thing that you said in the midst of how you're describing that specific situation is that you went to God first, right? You listened to God. You seeked what his direction was. And I think when we talk about situations like that, where when we're restricted to do things, maybe by a governing authority, maybe by an authoritative body of any kind, right? In your case, it could be the directors at a clinic or the people who are the chief of staff, obviously in the office, right? That you have to understand and respect and obey, because at the end of the day, that's their organization and whatnot. That there's some people who are just super headstrong, and I think at the end of the day, each person has the freedom to put their stick in the ground where they want to put it, right? With the hill that they want to die on, go ahead and lay it. If it feels like it's compromising your relationship with God in any single way, who am I to stop you, right? If that's between you and God. But I think sometimes as Christians, we lack the ability, the tact to be able to be like, okay, God, how can I approach this in a different way? Not necessarily having to, compromise, or what I feel is compromising. It's not necessarily a compromise thing, but how can I go about this in a way that's smarter, wiser, and still get the same results, right? So what was beautiful to hear towards the end is like, you have someone like a Nehemiah and a Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, people who are headstrong about their faith. That's important that they weren't going to compromise on, because that was what was targeted, was their faith in God. That's a non-compromise for me, for you, it sounds like, right, from what I heard there. But that being said, how I do it, right, when I go into a clinic, if they say don't do it, okay, I'll respect your decree. That doesn't change my faith. You're not telling me not to believe in God. So there's no compromise there. But maybe how I can do that is another avenue, right? Maybe that's, making letters, or, different ways that aren't necessarily directly proselytizing, your faith to someone, or your beliefs or religion, whatever that is. But there are other ways tactfully you can do it without necessarily stepping on the toes of people who say don't do this, like in writing. And so I think that's something that, to summarize basically what you were saying, that the audience can pull from that is, as a Christian, this is where wisdom.
Yeah, that was in my mind.
Wisdom. And I use that word a lot for a good reason, because I used to be a Christian who was just not, and this is to say, like, I didn't understand my faith at all, or I didn't seek wisdom to any degree. But there was a point in time where I would just be on fire for Jesus, and I'm just doing all this kind of stuff, but would never read my Bible, would never want to see. No, I just knew I loved Jesus, and I would just go do whatever he said. If some person lay their hands on me and say, you go do this, I'd probably go do it, because, they believe in Jesus. I love just saying Jesus alone was just enough to get me to go do things. And I'd be reckless in doing things. I would see the repercussions of not thinking through things, or really understanding, or confirming things that I want to go do with the word of God and what he wants me and how he wants me to live. And so I learned a lot of those mistakes, and because of those repercussions, through experience. And then I'm doubling back and being like, well, I open the Bible, I'm like, man, so God, you spoke to this specific situation, how I should go about it, or how I should view this situation. And yet I had to go through it to learn that lesson, versus when I could have just sat there and read and dwelled and meditated and had this revelation, which is why I'm a person. Many will approach and say, "Man, Kumi, you're really mature for your age." You're and I say that because I've learned a lot, and I hate making the same mistake twice. Call it perfectionist in me, but I'm that guy that once something has happened, and if it's negative, I don't want that repeat happening again. And then on top of that, with my faith, that reflection and introspection is always tied to, what does God see or say about it? And therefore, now that lesson that I learned is tied to a deep understanding of God's desire and will for my life and what he wants me to do. And when you can couple that together, it really stays. It settles in your spirit, it settles in your soul. And you begin to view God in light of every action you make. The Bible becomes your lens that you're looking through. And man, it will never lead you astray.
Yeah, the Bible can help us in any situation.
It does. It does.
And just,
and so, no, this is all really good. Stephanie, thank you for your time. I mean, that was going to be a perfect pivot. We were going to talk more about evangelism and sharing your faith and what that looks like in America. But again, that's a whole other topic, and I'd love to have you back on to discuss that even more further. But I really honor your vulnerability, especially when it comes to your testimony. You know, you've been through quite a bit, but just you being able to be vulnerable, you know, it shows the audience and the viewership that our faith is not all about the pretty moments in life, but there are trials, there are tribulations, different circumstances that each and every one of us go through. But thank God that we serve a God who sees us where we're at.
And he strengthens us.
And he loves you so much that he wants you to walk with him and work through that with you. God never said that, you know, when we walk with him, everything would be perfect, but that he would walk alongside with us in the brokenness and fallenness of this world into greater glory, right, whenever he comes back, right? And so I think just letting the audience hear that, and I hope that's what the audience takes away from a lot of this conversation, is that, first of all, God's real. Jesus is alive. But when you receive him, there's so much beauty in store for you. When you seek to know him and understand him. And so I just want to thank you again. Definitely going to have you back on to continue this conversation on that. And to the viewership, whatever nuggets you took out of this, once again, you know the drill. Let me know in the comments. And if there's any thoughts or opinions you have, love to hear it. And we'll see you next time.